Hey Joe fans, I'm Joefan82 here with another Sunday stream, and it looks like we've already got a few people here in the chat, and I want to go ahead and say hello and introduce you guys to my very special guest, Mr. Chris Declassified McLeod from the Full Force podcast and YouTube channel. Say hello, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Awesome. I want to say hello to Eric T, Classic Action Figures. Hey, guys. So, Chris, for those that for some reason might not know who you are.
Oh, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of people that don't know who the hell you're talking to right now.
If they don't know who you are, if you could give us a rundown of who you are and what you do on the podcast and here on YouTube.
Yeah, so I was born in my name is Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80, as you can see on the screen below me, I hope. And yeah, I'm basically the presenter, editor, supreme overlord of the Full Force podcast, which comprises of a number of different things, but most recently it comprises of news bursts up to the minute. I joke up to the minute. It takes me a while to put them together, so it's usually up to like the hour news bursts, comics bursts with Brian Hickey, where we discuss the IDW, G.I. Joe comics and other related brands. And we also have a Disorder of Battle, which is again myself and Brian Hickey, and we do old Battle Action Force kind of comics and stuff like that and review those. And of course we have the Full Force Weekly, which is like a weekly chat with myself and a couple of presenters, usually Justin and Pat, Justin Bell from Generals Joe's and Generals Joe's Reborn, and Pat Stewart, not Picard, from Articulated Points, Joe Declassified, Joe. He's done Pat's an absolute genius. Justin's great as well. Sorry, I'm just completely Justin Bell.
This is a safe space.
Chris. You know who that is? Yeah. Fair enough. But anyway, we do the weekly, and that's like a little kind of weekly wrap up of the news, but more depth, more discussion. Because the news bursts are just get the report out there, and for the 5 people that don't already know about that news, it's really good. And for the weekly, we can just talk about it in more detail, and we do other stuff, but effectively they're the main ones at the moment for the Full Force. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
And that's on a podcast that's available everywhere podcasts are available, right?
Kind of. Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher in terms of the audio. And visually, we have it on Facebook, we have it on YouTube, and I post the YouTube on the YouTube link on Twitter as well. So we've got kind of lots of different kind of accounts all over the place, but that's roughly what it is.
But no TikTok.
No TikTok. I really wanted that job though. I really wanted that Nerf CTO job. That would have been amazing. But no, someone beat me to that, and it's fine. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at all.
I'm gonna pass on TikTok, and I'll just jump on the next one. Whatever the next one is, I'll jump now.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I feel like I've hit. I'm 40 now, and I've hit that point now where I'm
39, so I'm right behind you.
I'm winning. Or losing, depending on how you look at it. Let's say losing in this scenario. But I mean, I kind of hit that point now where I feel like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are about as far as I'm going to go. I feel tech savvy, I can do all this. I do this stuff, I'm audio engineer as well in other areas, and production as well. I produce music, so like I'm fairly savvy when it comes to like tech. But like when like TikTok came around, I'm kind of like, do you know what? That's probably not for me right now. It's probably not for me or the podcast. But it's still a thing, and it's still amazing, and people are doing great things on it, and that's cool.
It's another thing that takes up time too. Like I do Facebook and Twitter for my channel here, but then to do Instagram and Snapchat and I just don't have the bandwidth to do everything.
It's bad enough having to put a post together on Facebook, then go over to Twitter and copy that and do that, and then go on to maybe like I do it on YouTube community, I know you do this as well, where you post like just like a poll or like you know, a bit of news or something, as opposed to a video on YouTube as well. And I do that as well. So it's like by the time I finish that, I'm like, I don't care about whatever this news is anymore. I'm in the middle of writing a news burst about it, and then have to record it and then edit it. And even though they're like 2-3 minute long kind of videos, sometimes not very long, you think that's really easy and quick to do. It takes me about an hour. Like, you know, after like getting the news, writing it out, editing it, putting it all together, and then posting, which seems to take more time than any other thing, like getting it on all those platforms. And I put it on like, you know, I put it on Podbean, and that sends it to multiple places. I put it on Facebook, and then I copy that over to like YouTube and Twitter. And it still takes me ages, and then goes through all the checks and the monetization checks and all that kind of. And it's like, oh, come on, just make it magically appear already.
You know what I really love that you haven't done in a while is your 3 to 4 hour in-depth looks at other lines that may or may be related to because I would wait, and when we're on a car trip, a road trip, I would just plug in my headphones in. Let's learn about inhumanoids, or you know.
Wow. Can I just say that was a period of time where I thought, yeah, let's just throw everything at this. Let's make this comprehensive as heck. Because I would share the show notes as well, and they're like Google Docs, and some of them are like hundreds of pages long, and that would take, well, you can imagine that would take absolute like weeks, months. It would take so long to put together. And I would get, you know, I'd try and get people on that were like related to it in some way, like either on that particular brand, or, you know, get like an interview on there or something. We had the Visionaries one as well. That's amazing. And that was like 9 hours long. The Transformers one, I think one of them broke 10 hours, and I was really proud because I thought, yeah, like this will be in like the Guinness Book of Records or something as like the longest podcast ever made. I don't know if that's the case. There's probably one that goes on for like 3 days or something, but man, yeah, people was like, why have you made these really ridiculously long podcasts? And I'm like, well, you don't have to listen to it in one go. You don't have to just go like, you know what? I'll just put 10 hours aside and rock this Transformers podcast. But, you know,
I don't need to go to work today.
I don't need to go to work again.
Hey, Woodman29. Hey.
Hello.
Tuning in. And we've got Woodman again. Sorry, let me go. Yorktown Joe. Good Sunday evening. And we've got Mikhail. It's Monday morning.
Morning.
Mikhail, where are you? Because we're not sure where that would be. And Draws Walker. Hey, Draws. So one of the main reasons I wanted Chris here tonight is because he recently did a Q&A. He and Carson Metaxas from 3djoes.com did a Q&A with the G.I. Joe team from Hasbro, and they got a lot of great information. And I wanted Chris to share that with you guys in case you didn't see or hear his report on that. So, Chris, if you could kind of tell
you everything that happened in that interview. Yeah, sure.
Everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah. First off, I suppose some background, I guess. The Hasbro FanFest happened, and we have like I've been doing a lot of interviews with like Lenny Panzica, and you know we've had other Hasbro kind of people in the past on the show, so I've kind of built up a nice little relationship with Hasbro and certain members of the team out there and everything. So we have a very kind of nice little dialogue where we can every now and again we can kind of get people on the show and do little interviews and stuff, which like I just enjoy, just hearing the design process and even things about like marketing and stuff I'm interested in. So yeah. So anyway, having built that relationship over a number of years now, I got an email just prior to FanFest saying like, would you be interested in any of these opportunities? One of them being, appearing on FanFest for a fan room. And I was like,
you were
that
like,
sounds
I gotta
hilarious.
check my schedule.
Yeah,
I
check the
don't know.
sketch. I'll get back to you on that one. I'll let my people speak to your people. No, you can imagine how I responded. Like, yippee! Yeah, that was like in the email, like in all caps. I was like, yes, 100%. So we did that. Myself and Justin appeared on the live stream, which was hilarious and fun. Carson was on there too. A number of other people, Adventures in Collecting, um, Toy Wizards, His Tank, all of the people that you'd kind of expect to be there were there, and Russell Sheath as well. Yeah, everyone was on there. There was a good group of people on there, and so we appeared, we did all that stuff, brilliant. Anyway, one of the other opportunities was, would you be interested in chatting with the team after the fact? And I was like, yep, sure. So myself and Carson were kind of thrown together randomly, I believe, and just so happens we know each other, we're friends. So it was great to be able to have someone like Carson, and I'm sure vice versa for him, to be able to do that kind of little chat and everything. And what was interesting was we weren't really given much of a pre-game or anything. It was just like, you'll have the G.I. Joe brand team will be there, and that was it. There was no, you can't answer these questions, you can't answer we can't ask these questions. It was just ask what you want and we'll see what happens. And it was like, okay, great.
Certain amount of time with them.
We had 20 minutes, but we actually got a little bit more, just fortunately, I think. And they were great. And obviously we spoke to Lenny, Ben Lenny in design, Ben, Paul, and Haley on the marketing team. And it was really cool and a lot of fun. It was the first time I met Paul and Haley. It was thankfully I've met Ben in the past, and he's great. Ben Montano, really nice guy, and like also really into Joe as well. Like he's been there since he was a kid. So it's interesting to have someone in marketing in a very similar way that we used to have with Daryl DePriest, who was he was a lifelong Joe fan, from like 12-inch onwards. Basically, he was like he was a really big G.I. Joe fan, and he was at Hasbro, so that was like like a good mix, really. And Ben is kind of cut from a very similar cloth in that sense. Excuse me. So it's always really nice to have him on. Like I said, 20 minutes, we had a short period of time to really kind of get our questions out. Carson and I, again, like I said, we didn't really have much time we didn't even know we were going to be on together. So that was another interesting thing. But Carson was great. He's, consummate professional. And, we got through it. We zoomed through what we wanted to talk about. There were questions we didn't get to ask. A few people were saying like we weren't like hard enough on them. And I was kind of thinking, well, what did you want us to do? Did you want us to go on there and be really rude and obnoxious? Because that was never going to happen, I'm afraid. For one thing, I'm British, so politeness comes, unfortunately, with that, and over politeness, I should say, so to the point of painful, excruciating interviews. But it was so, like, and funny enough, I started with what I thought was going to be like, the friggin' the forest fire of the Joe community at the moment, which was the Target exclusives. And I said, I asked them, can you talk about anything about the Target exclusive situation, and mainly about numbers? And, can we talk about what you guys are doing around those issues about getting numbers into Target stores? And Ben responded with what he could respond with. And that was that, they revealed they're doing Yojo June. I pushed it a month because the Snake Eyes movie. No, Yojo June, which is going to be like the whole month. Like it happened last year as well.
Yeah.
They did a whole month of reveals and cute posts every day and stuff like that. The whole month is kind of filled with G.I. Joe stuff, which is great. And they're going to be doing that again this year. And inside that, they're also going to be making announcements regarding. Sorry, I just had tea, so now it's coming back to me. It's coming back to haunt me immediately. They're going to be doing some announcements about possible reruns and reissues. I was amazed when he said that. Actually, I was like, okay, that's great for Carson and I. We were told as well, may I add, that this interview couldn't go anywhere. This was before we started the interview. It couldn't go anywhere else. It could only be recorded if we wanted it recorded for our own records. So obviously Carson and I jumped on that and said, yes, allow us to record this, please. And that's why later on I posed the question, because I'd noticed a few brands had actually got some of those interviews out into the wild.
Like they did this, I saw I think Marvel or Power Rangers, somebody had their group being interviewed, and I saw that somewhere. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that is that they weren't allowed to do that. So I don't think they were told initially. I think that when they got to us, they realized people were putting these things out. Or I'm not sure why they weren't told, because Carson and I were told like immediately beforehand that we could report on it. We just couldn't put it out there. So, all said fair enough. We were like, okay, we'll report on it. So that's exactly what we did. Oh, thank you, Classic Action Figures. Much appreciated. And yeah, so like, sorry, I dropped my pen. So, so anyway, that happens. And I then said to them, I've sent an email afterwards saying, look, I've seen a few brands, interviews go up, can we put ours out if I edit it and send it to you for, inspection first? And they were like, okay, send us an edit and we'll see what we can do. And I was like, okay. And what was amazing, I cut out a few things, but nothing that we didn't report on, thankfully. So I put everything that we reported on. The things I cut out were just like dead air, awkward situations, like whether, like a question couldn't, not actually, to be honest, they didn't really have any of those situations where it was like, we can't answer that. They were very open. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was going to get an email back saying, here are all the timestamps you've got to remove, and it's only going to be 2 minutes long. That's what I thought was going to happen. And they came back to me on Monday after that weekend and were like, yeah, absolutely fine. Looks great. Go for it. I think, and this is something that Carson mentioned before. Like he mentioned it, I think, in when we spoke about it on the weekly. I think they have, with Hasbro, there's this thing. They want to be in control of what they put out there, because that's one of the reasons why they, in terms of marketing, they need to be in control of like image,
which makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to put out content that you're not. If you're associated with it, you don't want to be associated with poor content. So I dressed it up as much as possible, thanks to Brian Sauer, who does our graphics, which are just gorgeous now. Like, we were like, okay, before Brian, and then I did Assembly Required last year, did Armor, like the online rally kind of Assembly Required convention. Thank you, McDowin. Appreciate that. Sorry, I'm seeing these comments come through, and I'm just like, thank you. That's really, I really appreciate it.
I'm bringing them up as I see them, because otherwise I'm going to forget. So I'm just.
That's great, man. I appreciate it. And and so like, completely forgot what I was talking about. But Hasbro and everything. So like, it was. I feel like the interview was like a really it was the best thing we could have done, and to get Hasbro to kind of sign off on it. Brian did a great job with the graphics. Like I was saying, at Armor, that's what I was talking about. Assembly Required online rally last year. Brian and I worked together on doing panels for the show, and he just did the graphics then. And I said, this is really cool. We should do this for the full force. And Brian was like, I'm already ahead of you. And he sent me all this stuff that he'd been kind of planning to do, planning to send me. And I'm like, yep, this is great. And we've been working ever since together. Anyway, back to the interview. So talked about Target exclusives. Target exclusives, check. They mentioned the reruns and the reissues. Very interesting. Yes, go for it.
But they did not say we will be releasing these specific figures. They just said it kind of in general. We have an idea of re-releasing.
Yeah, they just meant it was a vague comment. Well, he said that they'll be announced, because obviously they couldn't give too much away. So he said they'll be announcing during Yojo June. This kind of situation of reissuing and rerunning some items that were really hard to get. Not just Target exclusives, by the way, but he said blanketly exclusives and product that have been hard to kind of get so far will be, they'll be looking at reissuing, re-releasing certain things, which was like a very positive response, I believe, personally, because I know when you put one video out and like all the comments are just like, hateful, nasty, angry. Like what you can feel the tension in the Joe fandom at the moment, and
I
like
was gonna ask you. So I think I heard one of their team mention about that during the the Fan Fest and the GI Joe portion, and how hateful is the right word, but
yeah,
negative
we'll say
comments
negative.
with,
Yeah,
and I think he said when stuff is like that, it's just that they just kind of tune that out, and
yeah.
it doesn't really, they're really accomplishing anything when they do that.
Yeah, there's obviously there's the creative criticism kind of aspect that I think more people should adopt. But I do it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like people get angry, and you can't stop sometimes yourself from saying something. And like on the internet, there's just that it's made it very very easy to just pour your inner angst out at that moment in time. Like you could be it could be anything, but it's so simple to just go hateful, I'm so angry. And not many people are going to write that, but that's, and I'm kind of sugarcoating it a little bit, but I feel that I kind of understand it to a degree. I try not to take it to heart a lot of the time, especially when I'm not really responsible for it. And yet I've got people saying as well on certain comments, they'll be saying things like, you need to ask, you need to get people that aren't soft, and they need to go into so you're not going to interview people if you're that way. You're not I'm not Jeremy Paxman on Newsnight. That's only people in the UK will understand that. I'm not going to be getting...
I was going to say Mike Wallace from
There you
60
go.
Minutes.
There you go. Exactly. I'm not going to be and I'm not going to be going around to their homes, knocking at the door with a camera crew and be like, where are our Target exclusives, you SOBs? That's not going to happen. And yeah, that's also the language. I'd raise the language up a little bit on that. But anyway, yeah.
That
So
would
anyway,
be the only interview you would be invited to do.
well, that's another thing. Okay, this is going to sound really... I don't want everyone to unlike the channel or anything now after this, but what I'm going to say now, I hope this doesn't upset anybody, but I mainly do the show for me. When I say that, I mean, I'm not I don't feel like I'm doing this for the fandom necessarily. And I know that sounds really weird, but I do it because I enjoy it. And I don't enjoy negative interactions. What I enjoy is talking to people about GI Joe. I enjoy sharing stories with people. I enjoy doing this with you. I enjoy doing interviews with people at Hasbro because I genuinely enjoy the brand, and I love GI Joe, and I love Action Force from Palatoy, and I love that I love this stuff. So it's I wouldn't have been doing a podcast for however many years now if I didn't. So I don't really, it's one of those things where I'm doing it because I want to do it, and I want to be in a position where I'm talking to Hasbro on a regular basis because I want to know more info about the design behind Lady J and Flint, the design behind Zartan. Why did you choose this? Why did you go with that? That kind of thing. And the other stuff, it's kind of come along since doing the news bursts. It's become more important, I think, to dig into some other aspects, the issues currently with distribution and manufacture and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's another thing that Hasbro have told us in the past, that they've been affected quite heavily by COVID, and who hasn't? I mean,
Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
So
What were you going to ask?
So that was great to hear about the classified potential reissues. What other questions did you pose to them?
Carson asked some really good questions. Mine were no, I'm kidding. Mine were crap. No, Carson asked some really good questions. One of them obviously related to O-Ring, and that was a really interesting response because I wasn't expecting like, again, Carson and I did not talk about this beforehand. We didn't say, what questions are you asking? Because we didn't know we were going to be put together on this thing. I didn't even know he was doing it, and I don't think he knew I was doing it. So when we get there and we're like, oh, hey, how you doing? We didn't even have a chance to kind of say what questions we were asking. So when he popped out the O-ring question, I was like, oh, good idea, good idea to kind of see if they're interested in reissuing any kind of O-ring stuff for the vintage fans and stuff. And he and what was amazing though is I was just expecting him to go, blah de blah, retro this, whatever. And they were like, yeah, we genuinely are interested in that aspect of the brand. Lenny and Ben both are of the vintage persuasion, shall we say, in terms of having those when they were kids and loving those kind of figures. And this is another kind of thing. I feel like this was a read between the lines response, because they were saying they're trying to find the right way to do it, not just to release it, but to do it as well, like actually to make them. So what Carson and I discussed after the fact was that what it sounded like they were saying was they're probably not going to be doing they're not going to be doing an exact O-ring thing necessarily. They'll probably be doing something that looks very, very similar, aka by all intents and purposes from the outside looks like an O-ring figure, but would be like, the faux ring design or something different internally. That's just the technical aspect of it. But we were kind of discussing, that because they have to kind of keep in mind that it would only be like the collectors that they'd be aiming at here, like the vintage stuff. I'd probably get a lot of people saying, oh no, kids would love it too and everything. We loved it as kids, maybe. But I think, I also think that like that is really one of those things that's got the nostalgia attachment to it. And I'm not saying it wouldn't. I'm just saying from my thought process is that it probably would just be a collector line. And so with that, they have to consider how to do this at a good price, how to like get the costs down to actually create this again. Because, they've got molds and stuff like that. But like I said, if they're not doing exact O-ring representation things again, they're probably going to have to think about retooling the whole thing. So anyway, that was a read between the lines moment, but very interesting because they said a couple of other things. One was they are listening to fans, and they're scraping socials, and they're looking at all the trends, and they're looking at what people are talking about, what they want, what they appear to want, should we say, because that sometimes just because a lot of people are saying it on social media doesn't mean they actually do want it when it comes to being in the stores. I've seen that before in the past where you think, well, that's going to be a home run, and it's peg warming, and you just think, well, I'm sure there was a huge surge of want and need here, so you never know. But
that Cobra Island roadblock looked good to me. Why didn't everybody else? I actually did like that.
I do like that figure. I think it's really cool, actually. It's what I really like about it is the fact they went and did a different head sculpt. I thought that was really dope. Yes, Droz. That is good news to hear. Yes, they keep so that's the other thing as well. Like, keep the chatter up, but again, can we make the chatter positive? Can it be like, I really want them to redo Target exclusives, but like in bigger numbers, please. Like that kind of way, not like. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that again. But O-ring, very cool. Ear to the ground. They're looking and all that stuff. And also, I will say one more thing. Sorry, I will cut you off before you ask me another question. Next year is another anniversary, is it not? It's the
27th anniversary of the 25th anniversary, isn't it?
So if you think 1982, 2022, that's going to be 40th of Real American Hero, which was what? It was bloody O-ring, wasn't it? So is that like a read between the lines moment of we're waiting to do it right, and that could be next year for the anniversary. Again, that's all speculative, but that's something that is a possible read between the lines moment. Anyway, yes, you're going to ask me another question.
Now I forgot
what did I do? So Target check, did that one. O-ring was another big one. This was a good one. Do you want? So I jokingly asked them at the end of the. Not jokingly, I wanted to know, But I said, and I gave it, I kind of prefaced it with, I know you probably can't tell us, but have you considered the Joe brand for HasLab?
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't even hesitate. Ben immediately just said, yes. And that was it. That was the end of the response. Everyone giggled a little bit. And I'm there thinking, they're going to do a G.I. Joe HasLab for real. Like, you know it's coming. And I'm still in the camp that I think it's going to be retro. And the only reason I think that is because, and I'm probably wrong now, because I know Classified is, is such a big hit and everything, and people seem to want like a decent sized his tank and stuff like that. There's a lot of talk about that now. And I was thinking initially when all the stuff started coming out, I thought like retro seems odd to me that they're bringing out these figures, they're reissuing a lot of these figures that we had not too long ago, like in like the last round of figures that were available at retail. And I was thinking it kind of reminded me of the whole sail barge katana scenario, where that comes out for the vintage collection, and there were no vintage collection figures on the shelves, nothing. And they brought it back because they had this bloody great sail barge to kind of fill. And I'm not saying that people don't have those figures. People don't have, figures to fill this thing. Of course they do. Just like we have 25th, modern, 30th figures to fill something for, like a HasLab now. But it just screamed to me like, it's interesting that they're doing this retro line. I wonder if they're doing a HasLab project, and that's what they're doing. They're putting these figures out almost to, to fill that retail gap, as it were. And anyway, that was just a thought I had, and I'm kind of starting to change my mind a little bit based on the Classified success.
I was going to say, I would tend to agree with you. I feel like maybe the Classified line hasn't been around long enough for there to be the mass majority of people to invest in the HasLab. Whereas if they did a 1/18th scale project, you've got potentially vintage and modern collectors that would be interested in that, which Absolutely. Is, I think, a much larger segment than what it currently is the Classified.
Imagine a Cobra Island. You know how like the Joe Declassified guys talked about that one that didn't come out, but they kind of did, like loads. There's like loads of visual representation for it all over the place now. Imagine a Cobra Island for HasLab. How cool would that be? I mean, there's loads of cool stuff they could do. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day, isn't it? Right, so Target, O-Ring, HasLab. What else did we talk about? There was loads. I can't even off the top of my. I asked them about retro. I said, "Would you? Are you guys going to be, doing it? Are we going to expect any more retro?" Yes, was the answer. We are getting more retro stuff, and there will be announcements. Will be in Yojo June. In fact, a lot of it was effectively yes, and there'll be announcements, coming in Yojo June.
Which I want everybody listening to hear that, because I know a lot of you were upset that they didn't announce that. For FanFest, they only announced the movie stuff, but Chris talked to them, and now and knowing is
third of the whatever it is. Also, I will say as well, like I imagine Major Blood would have been revealed for Yojo June, but too late. He's kind of already out there. So, but we also know that barbecue's coming, thanks to the listing leaks and all that kind of jazz.
But sorry, I started talking and then I drank. So
that was like, I'm sure that's in a movie. It's like, if you want to get everyone to listen to you, just say something and then take a sip, and everyone's like, what's he gonna say?
But the street, I think you said the street date for Major Blood is supposedly
was that May 18th?
18th, which is before Yojo June.
Oh,
and it's weird to me that they would be releasing just one figure. I don't know if you feel the same way. I don't know. I feel like it's weird that they would only be releasing Major Blood and that's it.
I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling that, like, we had loads initially. Like the first run was like 3 figures, and then the Baroness with the bike. So like, whoa, it was like, was it Beachhead, Cobra Trooper, Roadblock, Baroness, and Bike. I mean, that. And initially, everyone's like, "Wow, this is amazing! This is great!" And then couldn't get any of them anywhere. The pre-order was an absolute nightmare. Finding them in stores was an absolute nightmare. It was like loads. Some people like having great luck, and they were having loads of products in their store, and other people, well, the majority of the most other areas, it was like unicorn dust. Doesn't make any sense, but yeah, it was really difficult to try and get hold of, and that kind of then and since then it's only been like a couple of figures at a time, hasn't it? It's only been like Viper, Firefly, and whatever. So yeah, I feel like they're minimizing the exclusives each time, and I guess
so now we're down to one.
Yeah, there'll be half a figure next after this.
They're doing a build a figure, but you can only buy one piece at a time.
I got the left boot. Yes. Yeah, it's going to be.
But they'll still charge $20 for that.
Oh yeah, of course. 25 now because of inflation. But yeah, you're right. There's that feeling that we also know that those are the figures. There's going to be another Target exclusive, and it's more than likely barbecue. So yeah. Oh, there will be Tiger Force. Don't worry. Tiger Force. We'll get to my history of. We'll get to McLeod's history very soon. Just hang you tight.
What was I gonna say? You guys in the chat beat me to the Major Blood punch. I was gonna bring that up at some point. I was gonna say I feel like. Not Major Blood. The Firefly and Viper issue that happened with Hasbro Pulse the other day. This is what I think happened.
Okay.
I think intern Jimmy was in the warehouse and he came across this box of figures that somehow didn't get shipped out. So he took it and he went up to Mr. Hasbro's office. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Hasbro, I found this box of figures. What should we do?"
And Mr. Hasbro's pulling his eye off and putting an ear there because he's a potato, and he's I
picture him with the big string. Just put it on a Hasbro Pulse there, Jimmy. Okay, but there's only 2 figures of each one. So who cares? Just do it.
It was Mayor Quimby and Millhouse in this particular scenario, I think. But yeah, I know. To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. It was just like, hey, we've got like we've got like literally 2 figures of each here. Although this is the thing, like it went up at noon. I know I got my email at 12:15 because that was the time stamp on the actual email, and I know a number of other people got theirs at 12:15 as well. Yeah. So that's par for the course with emails. I mean, like they're so hit and miss, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so like I know that a few premium members had that heads up because they were just they might have been on the site at the time, or they were just double checking something at that moment and it just happened to be there. So I know a few people got in early and managed to pick up a bunch of stuff. When I finally saw the email at 12:15, well, probably a little bit after 12:15, when I went in there, Firefly was still available. So that I would say that Firefly probably hung on for about 20 minutes while he was available. I didn't buy any. I have Firefly and I have the Viper. So I was only going in there to report on it. So I wanted to see like, oh, are they still in there? I checked Firefly, he's there. I thought, okay, cool. I better check the Viper. Nothing. As I went back to Firefly, he's gone as well. So it's like, okay, that was pretty fast. And but it wasn't like seconds. We're talking like 20 minutes because half of the premium members probably didn't know. And then the other half, finding it like 12:15, just dived in there and just went nuts. So yeah, and this is the thing as well, that partner exclusive like little extra that they're doing, Hasbro, was never supposed to be the that's the fallback for everyone. It's not. It's like a little bonus extra because they've kept. I think they said like they gave a percentage a little while ago, didn't they? Because when they explained what the partner exclusives were going to be doing, and I can't remember. It was a very small percentage of what the overall stock is for like Target and Walmart and so on and so forth. So it was only going to be a very small amount of figures anyway. But I still in my head felt like Well, if it's up to like they said up to 1 p.m., didn't they? Or yeah, I think it was up to 1 p.m. is what we're gonna, put them out for. So I just assumed, oh, they must have like enough, or they must have just allotted a section for the premium members, and then after that it will be open up to the rest of it. But that never happened. It was just gone for the
whatever's
premium
left
members.
over, everybody else can.
Yeah. And again, like I think they would. That's not them appeasing for the target exclude. And again, I feel like I'm making excuses for them, but like I feel like as well, I think people tend to think, well, that must have been what they were talking about in the interview. It wasn't. They've got other things planned for this stuff. That was always going to be the case. They always had that remnants of stock ready for their partner exclusive section on Hasbro Pulse.
Mm-hmm. Guys in the chat, I see you posting a bunch of questions, but I kind of
who is this guy? Is that coming up a lot? Probably.
They're really good questions, but I want to kind of save them for the end if we have time, because I want Chris to tell us some more about himself. First, is there anything else from the Q&A that we didn't cover? I feel like we got.
I think we got the big stuff, didn't we? What I'm going to do quickly is just have what Carson did. Actually, what he did that I'm glad he did was he put like a cliff notes basically together for what actually was said, what was reported on and so on and so forth. There's me kind of like busting my ass doing a weekly and all this kind of stuff, and he goes, well, I'll just put it in cliff notes and everyone can know about it then. So I think that's pretty much it. We've covered all of it, I believe. So Classified, they are well aware of the distribution issues, especially with the Target Cobra Island exclusives, etc., planning reruns and reissues, like we said. Oh, this is okay. They are considering vehicles, but they want to make sure they can do them well. This is for Classified. So that was another interesting thing about that one, was that, Classified at the scale it is means that vehicles are usually kind of kept in the motorbike kind of scenario, especially like Marvel Legends and stuff like that. So that was another kind of thing we had a little conversation about, and Lenny was very open with that as well. And he said, that's something that they've been working on. He's been trying to find ways for it to make sense. Like on the shelves, for collections, for display, and I think that is the biggest challenge of the Classified line, is because most of the vehicles for G.I. Joe, there are a lot of small vehicles. There's a ton of mid-range size vehicles, and there's loads of vehicles that they could just never do without some sort of HasLab backing. So yeah. Anyway, that was it, and everything else we've covered. So that was the Hasbro interview, effectively.
I want to let me see if I can do this real quick. I want to. So this is what as far as classified vehicles go.
Yes.
I want to see if I can share an image of the one that I would choose, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on this one. Chris.
Swamp Masher. It's a Swamp Masher, isn't it?
No, but that's a good one. That's a good one. Here we go. You guys ready for this?
Yes. Yes. 1,000,000,000% yes.
The Radar Rat.
What's the one I want? The Battle Barge. The Battle Barge for me. That floating, duck shooting gallery is what that would be, wouldn't it? Absolute fish in a barrel scenario. That is the Battle Barge. But yeah, Radar Rat. Radar, definitely. 100% love it.
I had this as a kid. As a kid, I loved it. And I think it makes perfect sense. But
it does. It makes absolutely all of the sense. I mean, there are a ton of ridiculous vehicles that you could throw in there that would just be like, why? You see, I'd love to see things like, Checkpoint Alpha and the Bivouac, all the little mini sets, like the rifle range, cute stuff like that in maybe deluxe sets in with figures, like a SDCC exclusive or something, where it'd be like And I did a few like mock-ups that I thought would be really cool. Like last year when people kept moaning at me because they thought I was revealing, like they were like, "Oh my god, I thought for a second this was actually coming out." And mate, the
I've
photoshops
seen a few of those.
they're not that good. So yeah, it would be like Outback, Tiger Force Outback with the bivouac set and things like that. I just thought like, Tiger Force Hit and Run and just hilarious stuff like that. There's your Tiger Force talk done.
So that's a good segue. I want to go into some. So Chris is from, I don't know if you guys know this, if you guys detected a little hint of an accent. Chris is from the UK and born and raised, right, in the UK.
I was born actually in Germany, but raised in the UK. But we'll get to that when I talk about when I Fresh Prince rap my entire life story to everyone.
I want from a you guys, most people watching, or a lot of people watching this, have an American perspective of growing up with G.I. Joe. I want to get your story growing up in the UK with Action Force and then G.I. Joe, and what was that like? What was the toys like? What was your access to the show, the cartoons? I want to know it all.
So my love for G.I. Joe, Action Force, and then G.I. Joe stems mainly from my father, who was in the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom. And
wow, that's awesome.
he served quite a long amount of time in there. But yeah, he was an engineer, electrical engineer in the Royal Air Force. And so like as a kid, I love I had really good relationship with my folks. I love them very much. They're super supportive, amazing people. Sue McLeod and David McLeod. And they, and my grandparents, who have both all passed away now, but they were also really kind of like significant in that kind of thing, really. So my dad's in the forces, and I remember this one time actually. When I was 7, I got viral pneumonia. And I was in the hospital for what felt like an eternity. And I vividly remember like being rushed. Like I collapsed at home. This was my mum hates this story because she's always like, I'd be like, I don't feel too good. I don't want to go to school today. And she just thought I didn't want to go to school that day.
Yeah.
And she sent me to school.
Little Chris is faking again.
He's faking it again. I'm sending him to school. She doesn't sound like that at all. She sounds nothing like that. She's from Birmingham. And she's Birmingham, but she doesn't even sound like that either. Anyway, she said, right, you're going to school. I'm not having that. I'm like, okay, fine, go to school. She gets a call saying, your son is really sick. He needs to go home. And she's like, oh my God. So she felt awful, takes me back home. I remember like just laying down in the hallway, just like collapsed in the hallway of my house. It was only a small house. We were in like this tiny little house in this village called Munsley, which is in Norfolk, and it's on the coast. We were right on the edge of a cliff, so the view was unbelievable. But when we actually moved, and 3 months later, the cliff subsided, and it's only like inches from our garden now, the edge of the cliff.
Wow.
Like it's. And we were so happy we moved when we did, put it that way. Anyway, so I'm like rushed to hospital, and I'm in, I get whatever, like, getting all sorts of, things put in me, like injections and, drips and all sorts. And I remember like just being like there. It felt like so long. And my mom, obviously, she had a little, like a mattress on the floor next to me, and she would sleep by the bed in my hospital bedroom. And like, I was in a bad way. So I was kind of like really mean to her all the time, because it was like, I wasn't really myself at that point. And she would, I would wake up and there'd be like, they bought me like this, it was like the Rambo M60 machine gun, the kids one, not the adult one. And it was modular, like it came apart. So I had all this cool stuff. They kept buying me presents to make me feel better about it. There was Thundercats figures, and she bought me like Spider-Man comics from the shop around the corner. and kept like bringing them in for me so I could have something to read and do. Honestly, she was, you know, bending over backwards to make sure I was okay. And my dad turns up because he was on, you know, he was on maneuvers, I think, and he was called in the middle of like some sort of ridiculous like military training operation, and he had to then, you know, he had to kind of make his way to hospital, and he turns up in his, you know, his beret, his DPs, all of his you know, his camo gear and everything. He comes in, and I'm just like, and I remember seeing him in the doorway just like dressed like that, and that always stayed with me, like that vision. I don't think I've ever really spoken to my folks about that. We may have talked about that, but like, you know, I never told them about that, how significant that kind of was. And, you know, I think at the time, it was really around about the same year that International Heroes was kind of making its Action Force International Heroes was making its debut. And I remember like kind of coming out of the hospital and, you know, on the road to recovery, eventually kind of going to this little store in Cromer, another tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, Norfolk, UK. And they had these, you know, these new figures. And what's interesting, the same store would also have the old Palatoy stuff. And I was born in 1980 in Germany on a military base. My mum was not very happy about that because it was rat infested. It wasn't very well run. It was dark and dingy. It was like I was born in a cave, effectively. And I was there for like 18 months before they moved back to the UK because Dad was stationed in Germany. So that's why I was born in Germany. And I'm not German. I was just, you know, British nationality, but, you know, that I was just born there. And so, you know, like going into that store and seeing like Palatoy stuff wasn't, you know, I knew of its existence vaguely, but that I'd never collected any of it. I ended up getting like hand-me-down toys from our next door neighbor, like a big box of them. They just said, you know, he had these, and it was like Action Force and like, you know, that Space Force as a cosmic cruiser in there. It had like, you know, like really cool, like Q-Force vehicles and stuff. It was amazing. And I thought these are really cool, but by then, you know, I'm looking at these like SAS figures with like 5 points of articulation going, oh, he's cool. But then I've got like my first Action Force figures, which were Flint and Quick Kick on, you know, Hasbro cards. And kind of like, yeah, they're not, you know, they're obviously not as good. So they'll just be like guards, or they'll just be like, you know, background fodder or whatever.
Right.
While I'm playing with the really cool toys that have got 68 points of articulation.
So those was it? So that trip to the store, was that your first time seeing G.I. Joe or Action Force?
Yes, that was the first time. That's the first memory I have of Action Force, you know, and G.I. Joe and that kind of stuff. But it's all kind of, because if you imagine at the time, there was a huge merchandise push, and Action Force was basically in all of like, we had Woolworth stores, we had, you know, like all these kind of like local stores near me before we got to the city, which was Norwich. Again, people may have heard about Norwich based on the football team who have just been promoted to the Premier League again. They go up and down. Anyway, soccer in the UK, sorry, soccer in the US, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about. But yeah, so we... so Norwich was like the nearest city, and that's where you'd go if you wanted to go shopping for like all of the, you know, the toys and the big cool stuff. But for the most part, you know, you didn't go there like every week. Well, I wasn't like a rich. We weren't rich. I was an only child, and mum and dad sacrificed a lot to keep me, you know, like entertained, I guess. And I would never really asked for anything, mainly because they would always be, you know, that I'd never, like, if we went out to a store or something, I wouldn't say like, you know, buy me this or buy me that. It was never that. That was never the case. I was kind of like very respectful as a kid, and also very like aware. Like I felt like I think my mum and dad treated me like an adult from a very early age. They treated me as part of like this team. We were a team, as opposed to like, you're a kid and you're going to do what we say kind of thing. It wasn't. They didn't feel that way. So that was another reason as to why I kind of got into this stuff, because they would buy it for me. And like I said, like my mom and myself, like my dad would be, you know, in the like you know, working on the in the RAF. My mom and I would end up going to like these little towns and stuff. We had one nearby called Roy's, which this is a really kind of crazy story, but this town, it's like, I kind of think of it as Springfield because of the story behind it. But basically, this town is Wroxham. Hovton and Wroxham is the town, right? It's two different places that kind of like separated by like a canal, like a waterway, and the town was taken over and like by this guy called the surname was Roy's, I think, Roy, and they basically built this shopping center in this town called Roy's of Wroxham, and the whole place is just this shopping center. So it's almost like the guy took this place over and it just became, and it's so bizarre and weird. But that's basically what that place is. It's not its own thing. It's like it's owned in a really weird and very dodgy, sketchy way. So my mum would take me there, and they would have they'd have Mask toys and G.I. Joe and all sorts of stuff. And she'd always be like, well, what grab one and we'll you can have that, and then we can go home and you can play with it. I'm like, okay, brilliant. And I remember getting the Hydro Viper there. I remember that day so vividly. I remember getting Hydro Viper there. I remember getting Vampire and what's his name, Floyd Malloy from The Mask. From The Mask. I sound like a granddad explaining this. From Mask, that Floyd Malloy and Vampire. That was I remember that, and like playing with that toy. Like that was another thing. When you got toys as a kid, how often did you bust that thing out like immediately? Like you're not even in the car to go home yet, and you're walking around like losing accessories and like chucking the box away and stuff. I'm like, no, not. And one other thing is, when I was a kid, I kept a lot of the boxes. Like I've got, I think the majority of my boxes from my youth. So like I've got this general box which I got for Christmas once, and it's inside it. I've basically like concertinaed all like then there's like the few mid-range boxes are in there and little boxes go in there and so on. So you open it up and it's just literally all of the G.I. Joe boxes and Action Force boxes I had as a kid. Mostly, some of them got thrown away, but I was very attached to them. I couldn't get rid of them, and I think the artwork had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
The information that's written all over it, the tech specs and all that, and the file cards and everything. I kept all the file cards I had as a kid. Got a stack of them from as a child. Still got all my old figures. Most of them in really good condition as well. Like, so I was very careful as well as a child. Like when I played, I didn't want to break anything. I didn't bash things together. So they're all very well taken care of as well, but also very well played with.
And you, so Action Force G.I. Joe didn't make it to the UK until
87.
87.
Yeah. So 82 was the Palatoy era, effectively, and we had the Action Man miniaturized down into 3 3/4 inch, 5-point articulation. The following year was the kind of upgrade of introducing teams, Z Force, Q Force, SAS Force, Red Shadows, etc., Space Force, and then we had we started to incorporate the G.I. Joe aspects because Hasbro and Palatoy had that relationship from 12-inch years, where Bob Breakin, who was like one of the lead designers, he and along with other amazing people at that company, developed and designed some brilliant things, including Bob's left hand being the Kung Fu grip. So when he sculpted the gripping hand, as it was called in the UK for Action Man, it was taken on board by Hasbro as the Kung Fu grip. So that's thanks to Bob Breakin, who's an absolute gem of a human being, and like we've had the pleasure of becoming really close, good friends with him over the years.
Didn't he like give you or your wife the Robo Skull or like
I'll tell you
prototype or something of the Robo?
He gave us the prototype of Skeletron, which was the mail away figure. And the interesting thing about that is that Kate my wife Kate, she's incredible. She made the 12-inch Robo Skull, 12-inch scale Robo Skull. That it was at one of the Joe-Cons, and it's just unreal. It is unreal, including the Red Wolf pilot that goes with it. She made it from scratch. She used this, I think it's like a Halloween skull from Target, and then like that's the basis, and then just makes this Robo Skull out of it. It's unbelievable. Anyway, Bob was so desperate to meet Kate and see that in reality. So she came over for Rollout Roll Call, and we kind of got, Kate and I got together in Loveland, Colorado, believe it or not, for around JoeCon, during JoeCon. And Rollout Roll Call was like 2 weeks later, and it just so happened she was flying out for Rollout Roll Call, and so we, the relationship blossomed over those two conventions effectively. And when she came over to the UK, she brought the Robo Skull with her to show off at Rollout Roll Call, which she well and truly did, and people were amazed at it. And since then, it stayed in my house, my mum and dad's house, because it was too much of a pain in the butt to take back.
Yeah.
So it's still there. And obviously, when we were back one year, we drove out to Leicester. We met up with Bob. He took us around this amazing. It was a exhibition of Star Wars toys, the Palatoy Star Wars toys, in this amazing museum. And we met up there. He walked us around, and he's like, "Yeah, design that." I was involved in making that. I was involved in making this. Took a picture with him in front of it was us and him in front of the old Death Star, like the cardboard Death Star Palatoy playset, which he helped design, develop, and create. And it's it's really surreal to me, because this is stuff that I played with as a kid. I had a few Star Wars toys when I was a kid as well, and sold all those very, very ridiculously when I was about 11 at a car boot sale. What do you guys call them? Flea market.
Flea market.
And yeah, so I had so many figures and vehicles, and they were like they were sold for like 50p, which would be about 16 cents in today's money. So they all went like some people like turned up immediately and were like, "Yeah, I'll have all them, have all the vehicles." And I was like, "Oh, great! I've made like £11 today." That's I felt like this, really great about it. And then afterwards, I'm like, "Oh, I really want my Star Wars toys back." But anyway, yeah. So it's weird that the designer, the head designer, or the lead designer at like Palatoy, was taking us around, showing us these things I played with as a kid. And yeah, anyway, we brought the Robo Skull to him. We took some pictures with him and Kate and the Robo Skulls together and everything. He absolutely bloody loved it, and it was great. So yeah,
That's
big shout
awesome.
out. Love Bob, great guy.
And you are, so as a kid or as an adult, you were a Tiger Force fan. Did that happen in childhood?
Kid, man. Tiger Force. I'll ride or die for Tiger Force, man. I'm telling you. So let's go through that first phase, the Action Force International Heroes phase. Is that goes on for a few years, like literally a few years, because in 1989, my mum and dad and I went to the United States. We visited my mum's best friend Kelly in Las Vegas, and so we fly out there, and we're I'm like 8 years old out there, just living it up in this amazing,
like The Hangover place. It's like The Hangover.
I'm just like, what is this place? It's ridiculous. And again, like very young, we going into like toy stores and stuff like that. I think we went. I remember vividly, and I can see it when I close my eyes, the wall of GI Joe figures. We're talking like the 89 lineup, and then obviously remnants of 88. Possibly a few 87 figures up there still as well.
But with these, so you're seeing in America, you're seeing what's on the pegs in 88 and 89, which is stuff that you probably didn't see at all in the UK, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just that, but all of a sudden there's like G.I. Joe and everything. And I don't remember if that was when I realized what GI Joe was, or if it was before that, because again, like, there was no internet back. Well, there wasn't internet back then. That wasn't something we had. The information was very, like, if your mate went to the States and came back and started telling you stuff, you'd take it with a pinch of salt. Like, you wouldn't necessarily trust the information coming back from a child, one of your peers. Like, that just wasn't the case. And I believe my mate Ian, well, I think this is the thing that, this is where I realized what GI Joe was. He came back from the US before, like, he went to the States, to Florida, I think, with his folks. He comes back and he's like a different kid. Like, he was just changed. And I'm not talking like, I'm not talking like the Vietnam vets change. I mean, like, there was this glow about him. He was like, oh my God, I've seen the world and it's beautiful. That kind of thing. Because we're from like this little seaside town in the middle of like nowhere. Like, it's a complete culture shock for a 7, 8, 9-year-old to go to the United States, and it just blows your mind, especially with the toys. And we didn't have Toys R Us until, I can't remember what year it was, but it was, I'd have to look it up, but it's like late 80s. It's not, you guys had it a lot earlier than we did. And so because of that, we go in, he comes back from the US, and he's like, yeah, and they call Action Force GI Joe out there. And everyone's like, whatever, mate. Whatever, liar. BS, whatever. Yeah, mate, whatever. And it was actually, he was right. He was totally right. It was GI Joe. And
so when you get to the store in Las Vegas, you're like, he was right.
Ian McQuatty was right. That's his name, McQuatty.
Shout out to Ian if you're watching.
Shout out to Ian if you're watching. You're not watching. If you are watching, mate, you were the one that told me what GI Joe was, and I remember that now as we're talking about it. It's weird what, when you start talking about it, you're like, oh, that was the moment, and it was, because I remember us all being like, whatever, mate, liar. And it was the case. I went out there. I wasn't corroborating his story. I think it started to kind of become accepted before I went out there as well as on holiday. And I go out there and I see this. I just see the wall of GI Joe, and one the figures that stuck out to me were the version 2 Storm Shadow. And I remember getting that and just being like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Flipping it over and reading it, I'm like, hang on, Storm Shadow's a bad guy, and it's GI Joe on it, and I couldn't see any Cobra stuff on it. And I'm like double checking other figures to see if they had like enemy or like Cobra sign sigils on there and stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Cobra figures, and that's a Cobra. So why is it GI Joe? And I'm reading the file cards completely confused, because we weren't being kept up with what was going on in the comic back then. I spoke to a couple of mates on Talking Joe. I think it was Ben and Chief had said that one of them was keeping up with the comics and knew about what was going on as it was happening. And I'm like, what comic store are you getting this stuff from? And that's the difference. They're in like a built up like metropolis area in the UK, and I'm from the seaside town where you don't get that information. So I had the Action Force comic, the weekly at that time, and absolutely adored it. It was the best. Like, that's my favorite comic of all time, Action Force Weekly, closely followed by Action Force Monthly. It was just amazing.
Which are completely different stories from the Larry Hama American GI Joe, right?
Yeah, they would sneak in the occasional like backup story from GI Joe, a Real American Hero, but it would be rebranded. They would change certain aspects of the text, file code names, all sorts of different things. They would change as well. So even though we were getting the Larry Hama story in piecemeal, and just whatever they could work out would fit their narrative, they would utilize it. So we weren't getting the story as it was told in the US, unless you were reading the GI Joe comic, which a few of my friends, I found out in the future afterwards, were. But for me, didn't know. So I see this Storm Shadow figure, and I'm like, what is this magic? It's absolutely gorgeous. So that was in the shop. My mom and dad as well at the time, they had saved up to do this thing, and they gave me pocket money. They gave me £100. It was £150. And we got it changed to dollars, which was like, at the time, was probably like $300. It was ridiculous, the exchange rate back then.
Wow.
I think it was close to about $200. I think I had 200 and something dollars. It was an amazing exchange rate back then. The pound was very strong at the time, and I remember having all this money. I didn't hold it. That was my folks held it, but it was like, you can have whatever you want, but that's what you're getting for the thing. So I'm like, okay, and we just went to this store, and I went like Storm Shadow, and then the next figures that stood out to me were Tiger Force Roadblock, Tiger Force Tripwire, and Tiger Force Dusty. And I pull them off the rack, and I'm like, what magical background color is this? Why have they all got tiger stripes? Why is there a little badge that says Tiger Force? Flip it round. I like this weird like yellow file card and like a little section where there are other Tiger Force figures to collect. Oh my god, this is insane. So like they all went in there, and like I didn't get, I think I got Duke as well, but I didn't get there was a few that I didn't get because they weren't on the pegs at the time. Lifeline, Bazooka I did get Bazooka because he was the only Bazooka I had, which was weird because Bazooka was like a major character in Action Force International Heroes, but I could just never find him on card anywhere. So I was like, this is great, because this was one of the reasons why Hasbro did that, was so that kids could get certain characters again that were out of like print run, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So like Bazooka for me, I was like, great, I now have a Bazooka. I've won. I've beaten this. I beat the system. But if you can imagine what that trolley looked like, sorry, that cart, I call them trolleys in the UK. What that cart looked like, full of GI Joe carded figures, up to and including $200 and something worth. It was like a dream. So I literally just blew my entire wad of cash in that like first store, basically.
Did you ever see or know about, I think it was Toys R Us had these like shopping sprees. Somehow they would do these like contests, and the kid would,
yeah.
That's what I'm picturing in my mind as you're describing this. You're just like,
I jokingly used an image to describe it, because I've told this story in the past many times. I mean, people that know me, that listen to the show, they've probably heard this story on every podcast episode I've ever done. But like, I use this image of that kid. You know that one where he's like really excited, like with you're in an aisle full of Joe. There's a shopping trolley full of Joe stuff, and he's got this like vehicle he's about to throw in the box, and he's all like crazy excited. And there are adults at the end of the aisle like looking at him, kind of like, one of them's the Toys R Us manager, and he's kind of like looking at him like with a big smile on his face, because he's obviously making a lot of bank at that moment in time. And I jokingly like photoshopped my head on it and my mum and dad's head on the adults like looking in, because that's what it was like. It was like that supermarket sweep thing where you just like, you hit that aisle and you don't care that there are other things around. You just see this like wall of like black, but also explosions and beautiful card art. Shout out Hector Garrido, rest in peace, because and other artists that worked on a number of the different individual cards. But Hector Garrido, man, like that guy made beautiful art that drew me to it and made me want to buy that stuff as well. Like, it was just incredible. So that was my first trip to the US. Somehow I managed to get a couple. Do you know what? Another thing that happened that first trip, I'm watching TV, because that was another big thing. Like the commercials in the US were insane, and like the toy commercials would always win me over. And Rambo Forces of Freedom was on once, and I remember seeing the commercial for the figures and just being like, oh my god, I need those. And every time I went to the States, there'd be a new thing. Like we went quite often. We went like 89, 91, 92.
oh yeah,
like it was like, like we went like a couple of, a number of times in the early 90s as well. And we continued to go because that was like that would not be the annual trip, but it would be like the biannual kind of trip with the family. And every time I went, there'd be something that blew my mind. And I remember one year we went and it was Aliens and Predator figures. I'm like, what? How? I'm like, because I knew of the films, I'd seen them, I think, at that point, and I'm
as every child had.
As every child had seen every bad film that they shouldn't be seeing at that point. Mine was through a mate whose brother was always like getting these on VHS, and like that was the way you did it. Like you always had a mate who had an older brother who was getting like music on the like tape cassette, like full of like mixtapes and stuff, like music you'd never heard of before, and you're just like, wow, where's he getting all this stuff from? It's like they're like these magical like creatures. They're just a bit older and have more like money than you do. That's all it was.
You know what
But
I
yeah,
did with the toys like Alien or the stuff that was based on properties that my parents probably wouldn't approve. We would be in the store.
RoboCop.
Yeah, if we would be in the store and I would see something that I wanted, I would kind of just like sneak it into the cart and hope that they just didn't notice as they were checking out.
Amazing. I like that's the thing as well. I remember I didn't even have to do a sneaky thing. My mom, when Turtles came out in like 89, 90, around that time, it was this huge wave of like, massive wave of like excitement for this brand. And I was reading like newspaper articles. It was on the news. I was reading like, again, magazines, and it had like, Turtles and the new craze sweeping the US and all this kind of stuff. It comes over to the UK. It's changed to Hero Turtles for one, but that was still super cool. The cartoon debuted, and we were all like, everyone was talking about it the next day. Like, did you see the Turtles? Oh my god, it was amazing! And I remember my mom. She saw these amazing. Like, she was in like one of the big bookstores, and they had the graphic novel section. And in there, she says, "Oh, this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like book 1, 2, 3, and 4." And I think she bought me the fourth one, because the rest had been sold out. And she brings it back one day, and she says, "There you go, I've got that for you for from I know you're into Turtles." I'm like, "Holy crap, what is this?" And I'm like looking through it, going, "What is this? This is like, is this like the first?" Like, is this like the initial comic? Because I didn't know anything about what I was reading. And because also it wasn't for kids. It was like super violent. Like, there's like foot soldiers getting cut in half and chopped up. It wasn't like really, I mean, it wasn't like swearing and sex in it, but it was like, the violence was there, the adult themes were there. I didn't tell Mom at the time. I think I told her after the fact, and she was like, "Well, you're all right. Don't worry about it. It's not, whatever." At that point, it's a bit too late now to be worrying about that. But I remember reading that and just being like blown away. And she's still got the other books for me at a later date. So eventually I got the 1, 2, 3, and 4 graphic novels that contain like the initial run of comics, which again just blew my mind. They were great, but yeah.
So you,
where are we in the history right now? I've done a couple of. All right, so I'll save you the hassle of one working it out. But effectively, I am like collecting toys like a fiend. Like, I just love toys, and every birthday it was like birthdays and Christmas, and then every now and again there'd be like the odd one or two here and there. So I'm not like getting full runs of everything. The only thing I ever really kind of completed as a kid, believe it or not, was He-Man. So Master of the Universe was my first ever action figure. Ever was He-Man and Battle Cat. He-Man and Battle Cat. So it was like that box set, effectively.
I got the Battle Cat for Christmas because I remember seeing a home movie where I'm opening Battle Cat.
Awesome. You see, that's something that really upsets me, is that we didn't have like video, like recording equipment or anything like that. Because back then it was like, you're talking like Sony Walkmans and friggin' Polaroid cameras. You're not talking like, that's the height of tech in the UK at that point. Like, I know a lot of American families seem to have like, they'd always have someone that had a video camera, and it's like, it kills me that we didn't have that, as kids. Or I didn't have that as kids. Some of the rich kids probably did, but like that was always a thing. But I'm not saying that I was very I was spoiled. I won't sugarcoat it. But I wasn't like, not in the personality way, but just I was always my mum and dad always wanted to get me stuff, and like I didn't argue with that. So it was like I was aware, should we just say, that I knew that I was very fortunate, is what I'm getting at. Just because I didn't complete lines, so I'm a completist now. But as kids, you're not really, unless you are like super well off, where you can get an entire run of product for like a Christmas.
I mean, sure, a lot of kids wanted to be completists, but it just wasn't possible.
Yeah. So, and I think you learn that at an early age. You realize that there are limits to that stuff. And then when you we had this kid that lived down the road from us in Munsley, James Campbell, right?
Shout out to James if you're watching.
Shout out to James Campbell. He's not watching because I don't think I've ever connected with him since, because he moved away after I only knew him for like a couple of years, and then he moved out of town somewhere. He was a really good football/soccer player, really good, and he may even have gone on to do some sort of higher level kind of football in the end. But his dad worked abroad and would always bring him toys back. And when we finally got, because he was older than us too, so when we finally got to kind of know him, we go into his room one day, and this is after this is like, I'm still collecting Action Force and G.I. Joe and stuff like that, but this is way after what we're seeing. And on his windowsill, he had the Killer Whale. Shipwreck was on it, and we were like, holy crap, you've got Shipwreck, because we just couldn't find some of these figures at all ever. And it was like stuff with G.I. Joe written on it. He had Palatoy stuff. And we're just like, and it was comprehensive. Like, it was a lot of stuff. And we're just like, how the hell are you doing this? And he says his dad worked abroad, felt really bad a lot, and he'd always bring him toys back. So he was like constantly getting all of this stuff. And he wasn't even that into it. That's the sad thing. He was like, yeah, it's cool, but whatever. And we're all just like mind blown. We're all like, and there's a few of us who really loved Action Force. And my mate Riz, shout out to Riz, Sean Risley, shout out to Riz. He's not watching. He was like he was like parallel another street over from me. So like, I'm on the cliff, and then he's got another house or so before his house goes into the ocean as well. And his house was on like the main road that kind of cut through the town. And we'd always like cut through this little block of flats to get to each other's house and hang out and play G.I. Joe. He had a Tomahawk, and I absolutely bloody loved that thing. But this is another thing. When we were kids, we kind of felt like we would we wouldn't have the need to get another, even though I should have had the need to get another Tomahawk. Because Riz had one, I felt like it was within our collection family. Sounds really weird, I know, but we had that kind of bond, and we'd bring our stuff to each other's houses, and we'd let each other borrow stuff and play with it. So there's always that kind of that relationship. And another mate down the road, he had the Maggot, and we were just blown away by that too, because that was really cool as well. But again, neither of us needed to get it. And one thing I will say about Riz, he bought me one day randomly. Him and his dad had gone out shopping, and when they came back, he gave me Gung Ho marine dress uniform on card. And I'm like, he said, yeah, we saw this, and Dad said, yeah, you should get that for Chris because he'd love that. And I'm like, what? So I was blown away. I was, thank you, so this is the best thing ever. And it was there was something really cool about that figure. One, it was unique. Two, it came with that little kind of sticker set which you could put on yourself, and you kind of felt like, as in you put them on the figure yourself, not as in I'm a sergeant, whatever, in the friggin' US Marine Corps now. It's kind of it's a little small, but yeah. So it was there was something really cool about it, and the fact that he bought that for me because he thought I'd love it was and I was like, what? So yeah, shout out to Riz and your dad, John, amazing people. So yeah, so getting through the point of what I was trying to get at here. So we get to high school, I guess, is where I'm going to start. I'm going to finish my first phase of this history lesson. And I had been collecting toys, but now I'm in high school, and that is a whole different level. I hit a growth spurt at 14, and I was well, actually, no, I'm 12 in high school now, I think. Is it 92 to 97? So I'm 12 years old, and, going to the high school, it was the different thing in a different town, different friends. It was weird. It was really weird. It was taking you away from your mates, putting you in a different class with different people. You've got to get on with them, and you've got to learn all these new people and be friends with them. It was tough, and it was really difficult early on. But got like I was very. I would like try and be friends with everyone. Like I would try and be like I wanted to be popular, so I was just really nice to everyone. I was really friendly, tried to be like really friendly with every single person. And you realize when you get older that it's a naive thing to think that you can please everyone. You can't. But that's what I tried to be as a kid in high school.
That's
And
the opposite of my high school experience
yeah,
for initially, because it wasn't the school didn't have the best reputation. So my method was to not talk to anybody, stay below the radar, and everybody will leave you alone.
yeah, like put the ghillie suit on and just lay in the weeds for 5 years. Well, anyway, the first friggin' year I'm at this school, we had it was a decent school. It was okay. But they had mobiles as well, because like for extra classrooms they had like the little separate kind of mobile setups. And we're going into this mobile, I think for music. I think it was a music lesson. And these two girls will come up again in a second. Claire and Vicky. Shout out to Claire Bonham and Vicky Hines. I'm still friends with them. They're doing. I think Claire's in France now, and Vicky's still. She's doing her thing. So still friends and everything on Facebook and all that. But back then, they were the cool girls. They're like the really cool, they're the cool chicks. And it was like, oh guys, anyway. And my mate Matt Bales, shout out to Matt. He had the maggot, by the way. I'm talking about the vehicle, not. Anyway, shout out to Matt Bales, Matt and Dean Bales. He, for some reason, thought it would be a good idea to shout at the top of his voice over to me, because he was talking to Vicky and Claire at the time, pointed at me with them there and said, that guy over there, he still collects toys. He still buys Action Force figures and G.I. Joe figures, and bright red, just like, oh well, great, that's me dead then. That's my street cred just obliterated. And the funny thing was, everyone in that bloody line still collected toys. We were only 12. We weren't like friggin' 18 at that point. Anyway, so that was like 92. So that had a bit of an effect, right? First off, I was still buying the Action Force though. It didn't deter me immediately. The same girls, Claire and Vicky, they went on a bike ride one day to my house, randomly out of the blue. I'm around another friend's house at this point. Beautiful sunny day in the summer. I think probably in that first year, like 92 possibly. And they come, maybe even 93. They come in, or they come to my house, they knock on the door for me. And we're talking back in the day, they live, like 10 miles away? So they cycled 10 miles. Not just, they were coming to Muncie because it was like a seaside resort kind of town anyway.
Okay.
But they thought, let's go knock for Chris. Like, they know my address. And that's another thing. Like, we didn't have GPS or any of that stuff back then. So it was like, how the hell do you know where I live? Like, how did you know that information? So they come round anyway, knock on the door for me. Mom answers it. And he's out at the moment. Why don't you come in, go up in his room, and I'll bring you some drink or whatever. And then when he gets here, and they're like, oh, that's great. So they go in. And like, if you can imagine, my room was like a citadel of an 8-year-old's room. So
but you were 12.
I was 12. So literally plastered walls, Manchester United posters, Ryan Giggs, Paul Ince, Mark Hughes, whatever, like all over the walls, like Manchester United everywhere, right? Freaking, this is crazy. It would have been like 93, 94 at this point, I think. So I would have been about 12, 13, should we say? 12, 13 years old. And toys everywhere. Still got G.I. Joes on my friggin' windowsill. I had a friggin' cabin bed still. A cabin bed with a desk underneath it and a wardrobe attached to it. It was like it was a child's room. And I come upstairs. Mum's like, "Oh, some girls are here for you, Claire and Vicky." And my heart sank.
That's when if this was a movie, the camera would push in on you, and the background is fading away. Like,
yep, exactly what happened. exactly what happened. So I go into the room. I'm like, and they were just we call it ripping the piss or taking the mickey or poking fun, shall we say?
Okay.
But it wasn't that bad. I joke about it. Well, it was life changing at the time, because at that point I'm like, right, I'm out. And I remember Claire and Vicky left, and they were still fun. We had a good laugh and everything, and hung out, whatever. We ended up leaving and going to the beach, and that that was it. Like, doing kids stuff, whatever. And then I basically came back and was like, right, Transformers. They went in like this the G1 whatever I had. It was like Springer and all those figures and everything. They went straight into like the drawer, shut. That's them away. Plastic dinosaurs I had all over the place too, because I was really into dinosaurs, like super. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I really wanted to do that when I was a kid. I was really into it, books and all sorts. And so like they went into like this bag under the bed or whatever, and I'm just like taking all the posters down. It just became the most minimalist bedroom ever. GI Joe's got like gently and carefully packed away, either back into like boxes or like carefully put into the closet. And I just was like, right, okay, this is me now. Like, I'm growing up. Like, I have to grow up for high school, and this is what it is. And so that was like, that would have been 93. So, which was actually fortunate, because the last figures I ended up buying were in 93, and that's because we didn't have figures in 94 like you guys did. We kind of finished with like General Flag, the different Destro with the disc firing kind of thing. We had those figures. I remember buying them at Starling's in Sheringham. Like, right, like I'm out at this point, but I'm still buying. I see these figures. I'm like, General Flag's really cool. Destro's really cool. This Duke's like with the tan gear, he's really cool. Getting all these. So like I was still like, on the low trying to like buy this stuff, but I was effectively out at that point. And then that was it. This kind of G.I. Joe blackout until like I want to say like 2002. I ended up going. So I was kind of blissfully unaware that G.I. Joe was still happening. Like, so obviously 94, knew nothing of 94. 95 and all of the kind of cancelled stuff, way out of my radar until I was like, in my 20s, 30s or whatever. And then, so like that whole period of like G.I. Joe versus Cobra, Spy Troops and all that kind of stuff just was completely not in my headspace in the slightest. And so when I got back into it, it was around. I ended up doing this thing in Camp America, which was you could basically sign up and be a camp counselor in a camp in the United States for like the summer, and you get paid and you get room and board and you get fed and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And it was like a really cool way for us to kind of go and travel safely, and then like do like a little road trip or something after the fact.
Like a work abroad kind of
exactly. And it was a proper official thing. I remember my mate, Dan, shout out to Dan Payton. He, Patch was his nickname. He had applied for it and said, you should do it as well, and we should go to the same camp. And I was kind of like, I don't know you that well at the time. Maybe. So we ended up going to this fair in London and signing up for this camp called Camp Luema, which is actually shut down now, like recently. I think it kind of closed its doors like year before last. It was really sad. And like, I was like, wow, because I'd gone there for like 5 years over the space of 6, I think it was. Like 5 summers, I was doing that because I didn't want to grow up and get a real job. I just wanted to travel for the rest of my life and have fun in the States. So this was in New Jersey, believe it or not, as well. So
you wanted your career to be a camp counselor in the US in summertime.
Well, funnily enough, and this might come as a surprise to some people, but I was playing semi-professional basketball at the time. I was playing for a team called Kings Lynn Fury in the National League in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, so what really was interesting about that was that because I was huge into basketball, played for like, the county, played for like, the numerous teams in the area, absolutely like adored it. And it was literally when I was younger, it was a wake up in the morning, play, train, go to sleep. It was like that, like every day for so many years. And then, you know, you'd kind of get into that like mentality of that was what you wanted to do and what you wanted to be, and you know, you were going to do everything you could to do it. And then you hit that point where you're like, I literally can't go any further than I've done. You know, like I give it up to the actual pros, because it takes beyond any kind of dedication you can even think of to be that disciplined to you know, to get to the professional level. So I was really like kind of like happy that I did what I did in the sport. Like I was a shooting guard. Again, like I said, I adored Michael Jordan. He was like my, you know, he was my
Who doesn't?
hero.
Who didn't?
Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
but like, you know, again, that's the only thing you ever hear about in the UK. Like I had to check, this is hilarious. We had this analog system called teletext, which if you went on your TV and pressed a button, it would give you a black screen with, like, you know, really old school 8-bit text and everything, news reports, sports scores from around the world. You type in a number and it would take you to the page you wanted, right? It was proper analog, proper old school. That's how I would get basketball scores. I'd go to page like 310 or 313, I think it was. Can't believe I remember that. But I would click on that and it would take me to like this page that would refresh and show you all the NBA scores from that night. And then you could click on another page to get the report from that game. And every time I'm like, Bulls, what did Jordan score? 25. Cool. Okay, that's all right. That's not too bad. Bulls, what did Jordan score? 48. Amazing. What did Jordan score? 43. Oh my God. What did Jordan score? 25. Okay, yeah, cool, not bad. So like that's what I would do. Like that was my ritual. It was like every morning I'd check the scores. What did the Bulls do? And, you know, again, going to the States was a big deal, because, you know, like I would be like looking for people to play with. Like, so I'd go out onto the courts and stuff nearby and I'd shoot around, and then people would start talking to me and they'd be like, you're from, where are you from, man? Where are you from? I love your accent. I love your accent. And I'd be like, from the UK. Oh, from England. I think I used to say from England. I never used to say UK when I was a kid. I'm from England. I'm from a place called Norfolk. And they would always be like, oh my God, this guy can play. And that would always be like my in. Like, you know, I'd kind of like shock them that oh, this English white kid wants to play ball with us, and it'd be like, oh, he can actually ball and he can shoot as well. That was my thing, was like shooting. Like I just loved threes. That was my because I was lazy as well. Like I didn't want to like bust my gut down the court.
You want to actually run. You just want
to just get to the corner. Done. So it was like, yeah, I was like, that was my specialty, was kind of 3-point shooting.
Real quick, action figure expert has a question. Why did those two girls go to your house?
Well, again, like we were kids and it was just about hanging out, you know, just about like seeing friends and stuff like that. I was really close to Claire and Vicky. So it wasn't like I was, you know, it wasn't like, where did these girls come from? But this was like a year into high school. So we were all kind of close at that point. So I think it's just one of those things where you know where your friends live. It's weird. Like at some point, like you have to, I don't know. It's hard to remember roughly, but yeah, they were just around there to hang out. That was all it was. Nothing weird, or, you know, we were like 12 or 13, so it wasn't even like a thing. Anyway, yeah, so ball was a big deal. Basketball was a huge deal. And that was kind of, when I went to Camp Loemma, it was as a basketball counselor. So I would basically, my job was to, you know, train the kids on basketball. And again, it was like a lot of fun. I was playing semi-professionally. I was doing a lot of coaching at the time. I'd done all my coaching badges. So like that was kind of what I was into. And it got to the point where, because we would get, this is really weird, but my week as a semi-professional basketball player for the Kings Lynn Fury would look very odd. So Monday, I'd have to go to this school in the middle of nowhere, like Terrington St. Clement, I think was one of them. I'd drive there, get there. They don't have any basketball nets. So you're just going to have to teach them fundamentals of like dribbling and stuff like that. And they're only little kids. And I'm like, okay. So it was like, oh, how are we going to do this? So I get the bag. I'd have like, you know, 2 bags of balls in the back of the car, take them to the little, you know, the little gym or whatever. And then the kids come in, and then we'd we'd run some fun drills and stuff. I'd get them like, doing little games and stuff. And then sometimes I'd even like get them to pretend to be nets. Like I'd make one of the kids like stand there with a little hoop for arms.
They're just
like
hanging from
yeah, they're all like dunking on him. But to get the smallest kid as well. So they're all like yeah, the ball doesn't even like reach to the floor. Anyway, so yeah, there was things like I would be doing that. I would training like kids in random schools, like, for the week. And then we'd have training multiple times a week, like twice a week. So I'd get paid for training. I'd also get paid for doing the coaching. And then we'd have a game on the weekend. So that was kind of like my week. It was like basketball. And after a while, I wasn't making a huge amounts of money. Like we're not talking like, I can retire now. It was like minimum friggin' wage, but it was fun. And it was like, I think like a couple of our games even got televised. So it was like, there was some like really interesting aspects to it. And like, we'd go to some games and it would be like hardly anyone there and like really terrible, like, facilities. And then we'd have a home game. We had one of the best facilities going with like bleachers. Loads of people would turn up. We'd have DJ music. We'd have intros. They'd like play music and they'd introduce all the players, like in the like it was being like the friggin' NBA.
Yeah.
So it was like really, really interesting, weird, fun time that I never really enjoyed enough at that moment, because it was all about playing and winning and all this kind of stuff. It was odd. It was really odd, and I kind of miss it sometimes, but at the same time, like you just like I said, I hit that point where it's like the dedication required to be like something next level is ridiculous. So yeah, you realize that early on. Anyway, so went to the US again in 2002 to do this camp thing. And I remember going, my mate Rosie, shout out to Michael Rosenzweig, he took me on a day off to Zap Comics nearby where he lived. And we went in there and I'm just like, oh, this is really cool. I had toys and all sorts. And I'm like, this is like rekindling all the nostalgia. On a rack, and I don't know if it was 2002, it might have been the next year. I can't remember when the Devil's Due comics came out. But effectively, there was this rack and it had, I think, 1 to like 7 of that first of the reboot. And I'm just like,
you mean when Image had it?
Yeah, Image. Okay. Sorry. And I'm just like, holy crap. So I'm like, yeah, get all of them, got as many back issues as I could at once. And then that was it. Like I was trying to keep up with that comic. And they had a cabinet with all the vintage figures. Like they had like a ton of vintage G.I. Joes on, all with all the gear, all the accessories, and on stands. And I'm just like, man, I need to come back here. I need to buy everything in this store. And I didn't, because I didn't make that much money while I was there. But we also would have days off in New York. And we'd go to New York, we'd go to Manhattan, we'd go to the Toys R Us in Manhattan, because, I'm a freaking nerd and I'm going to do it. So we'd hit the giant, what's it called? The ride in the middle of Toys R Us Manhattan, that huge Ferris wheel. So we go on the Ferris wheel, and that was amazing. But they had the most incredible G.I. Joe wall, and it had the kind of like a full size guy in like the army gear with the parachute coming through the ceiling. It had a Jeep pushed through the wall, like with G.I. Joe written on it, and it was all like, it was that era where they'd read on like Action Soldier and Marine and Sailor and all that kind of stuff, and they also had a bunch of other stuff out there like Joe versus Cobra and Spy Troops and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, what is this? And so that was another thing that I started collecting, but it was Sigma 6 that I started collecting first to get me back into it. And I remember, again, going out and seeing these Sigma 6 figures and being like, what are these? And just I got like one Storm Shadow and then all the different Snake Eyes that I could find. And thankfully, they all broke down nicely into those little containers. So it was easy to pack. And I just had like, I think 6 of those containers to take back with me, filled with the figure and all the weapons and everything. So Sigma 6 got me kind of back into it. And then that's when we go to like New York and we saw all the other stuff. And like I said, I was there going back like every summer. And every summer I'd be bringing back G.I. Joe toys. And then the comic packs were a big deal. And, all the reissues and everything were huge. So I jumped back in then, and then when 25th happened, it was like, wow, like we have reached a pinnacle, and we hadn't even reached a pinnacle, but like that's what it felt like. And getting back in then, and the internet kind of being like a place where you could actually go and talk to people about it. And that was where I started in Justin's Dio stories, Justin Bell's Dio stories, which are like famous in the GI Joe community now.
Infamous.
And we joke about that, like kind of like now, because like we definitely infamous, but we joke about that stuff now because we're friends now. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like I was like fiending for more Dio stories at that point. Like, where's the next Justin Bell Dio story? Yes, Phoebes, exactly. You might have heard a bark in the background there.
Do you remember the first time you walked into a store and saw 25th anniversary on?
Not really, because most of my 25th anniversary stuff was getting it online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like because so 25th happened, and I'd stopped doing the. I wasn't traveling for Camp America anymore. So 25th happened in like what was it, 07?
07, yeah.
So yeah, that would have been So I'd have done 06 was my last year, I believe, in New Jersey. So yeah, when 2007 happened, it was all online. So difficult to buy, it's expensive shipping. I tried to get it through I think Guru Toys and Small Joe's. They were mainly the places I would go to get everything. And if you look at
they didn't make it to retail in the UK.
No. Okay. The only people that had them in the would have been independent sellers. They didn't hit stores. The first time we got G.I. Joe back on the shelves in the UK, I was working at Toys R Us at the time, and Rise of Cobra came out, and all the Rise of Cobra figures hit. And I remember vividly being in the back when they got delivered. Probably like 2 weeks before Street Day, probably longer than that actually. We got them in advance, and I remember they were like, "Yeah, they're going over here in the warehouse," and I'm like, "Okay." And I went over and opened every box, took out every one of everything, and kind of stacked it, like not hidden, but with everything, just knowing that we had one of everything, and that was going to be mine the day they went on sale. And I even remember saying, requesting that day of sale as a shift, and saying I need to be on that day. And they're like, "Okay, sure, no worries." And I was in the electronics department. I started off in the bikes, and I hated it. I hated doing the bikes and outdoor stuff because I've got some stories to tell you there. But if you've listened to the podcast or anything like that, you've probably heard these before anyway. But I remember, being on the electronics at the time. I think I was in the electronics at that point. And obviously, we were right next to the actual action figure aisle. And I remember okay, we're putting the G.I. Joe stuff out. And I was right over there just like, this is historic. This has never happened this hasn't happened for so many years for retail to have G.I. Joe figures. I was just about getting friendly as well with a guy called Nick at In Demand Toys, who was an independent seller. He was doing ridiculous, amazing numbers as an independent. And I remember going into a store and buying Sigma 6 figures and ordering. There was you remember that battle set that was like a big clear open box with the tank, his tank, stalkers in there. Like there's all sorts of figures in there, and it's done out like a Dio set. I remember him getting a couple of those in. I bought both of them. Like the Ninja Arashikage DVD box set as well, with the really cool Arashikage dojo kind of diorama. I remember vividly him getting those things in, and direct to consumer. He had all the direct to consumer figures, and that was really new to me as well. And so it was an interesting time. And when the Rise of Cobra came out and they were all in, I was just like, right. And I, in my uniform, straight to the tills, putting all these G.I. Joe stuff through, like really happy with my I think it was like £5 discount. We got nothing, man.
It was so you're like, one for the store, one for me. One for the store, two for me.
It was more like one for the store. And that was it. They can get the peg warmer. I'll have the rest. They can have the volcano, the pod, the underground pod thing. They can have one of them. I'll have the rest. No, it was an interesting time, but also really like it felt historic in the UK for me because it was like G.I. Joe is back on the shelves, and anyway.
And Mikhail, his Rise of Cobra was his introduction to the
Amazing.
franchise.
Amazing.
So it's hard to imagine. We grew up with it, but then other people, I think a lot of fans forget there's so many different entry points. Sigma 6, Rise of Cobra. I imagine Renegades was there.
Yeah.
If they were able to catch it, but moved around so much.
I must admit, I did love Renegades. But in any case, like that, it was really cool for me because like that line was actually really good. As much as like the film was a bit iffy, I wasn't like a massive fan of the film, honestly. But like the actual toy line itself, I mean, we got so much product, and there's some misses in there, but there are some absolute belting figures. And where you had like the 25th, I feel like Rise of Cobra was like there was some developments made and there's some improvements made on molds.
Definitely.
And it really took it to another level, even though like some of it was a little bit like okay, movie, whatever, but some of the figures were great, and I loved some of those exclusives. Like some of the Toys R Us exclusives were amazing, like the Quick Kick and like the Alpine with all the crazy colors, and like you just some beautiful stuff in that line. Like I just absolutely adore the toy line, especially. Thanks, Dagon. I'm quite famous. What's interesting, actually, the last couple of years, I haven't been as famous for my hair as I once was. Not because I don't have it. I still have a lot of hair. It's just that when we do shows, this is going to sound really vain. When we do shows like this, I always have to wear headphones. And like, I can't be bothered to do it. So the hat goes on, headphones go on. So there's no damage there. But yeah, I usually have this ridiculous coif of hair. But honestly, since COVID kicked off, I haven't had to go outside very often, so it's not like just the hat has been on almost permanently.
So you haven't cut your hair since last March.
It's getting a little bit ratty at the back now. No, I've thankfully Kate watched a YouTube video and cut my hair as if she was a professional last time, and it was amazing.
While she was watching, so she's watching.
Yeah, stabbing me in the back of the head. No, it was impressive. Kate's got this really annoying knack of like she'll like in a good way though, of like being able to watch something and then immediately be able to do it. Like it's crazy. But like I'm talking like some like next level complex stuff. She's a genius. And yeah, she's great with customs and building stuff and all that stuff. So obviously cutting hair is like so easy for her. It's just like, no worries. Just watch this video, and then I had this, and I even took a picture of it. I was that impressed. I was like, guys, I've had a haircut that's, in actual fact, sometimes better than any I've had at a hair salon. So yeah, there we
go. So we've been going quite a long time here tonight.
Where are we now?
And we're at almost. We've been going for almost 2 hours, but
sorry guys, I apologize. That's a long.
No, this is great. This is great. I love hearing people's stories about how they've been with the brand and fallen away and then come back. Yeah. But you've been pretty much constant since
it's like
Sigma
2000,
6.
Yeah, 2002, 2003, yeah.
What was there was something else. Oh, so maybe real quick, what does your collection look like now? Do you have vintage, modern? What makes up your collection now?
All right, everything. So I got into this habit of like going to a lot. Again, friends with Nick Wells is a bad thing. Nick Wells, In Demand Toys. He got me going to these conventions. He was like, I was around there once, and we were good friends at that point. And he said, "Do you want to come to this convention called Auto Assembly in the UK in Birmingham with us? It's a fun weekend. You get to hang out with people, play with Transformers, buy Transformers, watch cool stuff about Transformers, panels and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. I'll come. Helped them kind of like with their booth and everything, and kind of got hooked on doing these shows. But like, obviously, what it means is you're exposed to all of this product. You know, I'm already an addict. I've already been like collecting for a little while as well, like getting as much GI Joe stuff as I possibly could. And then like we go to the auto assembly, and I met loads of people. And funnily enough, I actually met Dave Tree there. Now, Dave Tree was one of the founding members of the podcast with myself and Eddie Inman. The three of us started the Full Force, and that kind of came about quite interestingly, but I'll get to that later. I'll get to that in the fourth hour. So so I met him there, and Dave is like big into, you know, GI Joe and Action Force, and he actually is a bit of a historian, and he was one of the people that unearthed the mystery of Bombardier, which was the figure that Ron Connor had posted, which was that kind of repaint of Flash, which was doing the rounds like for a number of years, where people just like stumped as to what the hell it was. Like it came out of like, I think he said it like came out of like a Hasbro employees collection, but they didn't really remember where it came from or how they got it. And Ron posed the question online, and no one seemed to know the answer. And then Dave so happened to be doing something for Star Wars at the time, like some research where he'd gone to the Children's Museum in like the V&A Museum, the Children's Museum in London, Bethnal Green, I think it is. And he went to this museum to check their archives. And it's one of those things where, have you ever seen that scene? I can't remember which one. I think it's like in one of the Dan Brown adaptations, the Tom Hanks kind of Dan Brown movies, Angels and Demons, where they go into the Vatican library, and he has to there's like armed guard, and like they have to kind of turn pages with like tweezers and stuff and wear gloves. It's kind of like that, but not as strict. But he went in there and he's like looking for this stuff, and then he found a bunch of Palatoy Action Force like kind of things, like some artifacts. So he kind of takes them out, and he finds like this whole like sub team that never made it, but was devised by the designers, and it was this special weapons force. And one of the figures in there was a repainted Flash called Bombardier, and it was a different paint scheme than the one that Ron had at the time. But after doing some digging and getting some pictures from like Bob Breakin and other people on like designers and stuff, they found all of this like information where they had tried to do another like Z Force, like Q Force, like Space Force, another team called Special Weapons Force, and one of the figures was going to come with a white repainted Vamp, and that was going to be Bombardier, like the one GI Joe figure in the kind of 5-point of articulation crew, which is what effectively they used the GI Joe figures for early on in Palatoy. They used them as vehicle drivers because you could bend the knees and they were more articulated. So they still kept like the 5-point of articulation figures, but they would, trickle in some of these GI Joe figures. And yeah, so Dave posts that information, and the mystery is solved. It was somehow got to they still don't know how it got to the US, but very likely the Hasbro Palatoy connection is how it got to the US. And and that was effectively what Bombardier was. And Dave became quite well known as a kind of Action Force GI Joe historian. So I got speaking to him, it was great. It was like learning all this new stuff and going, oh my god, this is crazy. And then like what I kind of realized as I was going to all these conventions and buying all this stuff, I started to kind of you start picking up the knowledge, and it starts growing a little bit, and you start becoming like not an expert necessarily, that comes much later, but you start becoming someone that people turn to for information. And they'd be like asking me questions about, and then Nick started using me basically as a GI Joe information person. Like if you got like a lot in, I'd be there to kind of help him like organize it, and these are the this is where the accessories go. For the most part I was on it because it was still fresh in my mind. And G.I. Joe was one of those things that even though I was out of collecting, I was still aware of it. And I would often go back and look at those figures as a, like in the lean years, the years where I wasn't buying anything or aware of what was happening in the stores. And, like I was still kind of like, I don't know, my mind was still very strongly attached to that era and that feeling. And so a couple of years go by, as it were, and I start going to JoeCons and stuff like that. But Interestingly enough, excuse me, sorry, I've been talking for so long now. I'm starting to lose my voice. My word burglar. I'm gonna call him out. Sean J. Berg. He released Welcome to Cobra Island. Now, rewind about a year and a half, and I'm starting to get into music production in a big way. And I made beats from like I want to say like 16, 17 years old. So I was making music, like hip hop beats. I was really into hip hop. Playing basketball was like, that was like the, we all loved, everyone in the team, we were all like hip hop heads. So, very kind of into that kind of the culture, that genre of music. And so I started making music myself, and built up like a little kind of, I don't know, like a little portfolio of music. And I ended up going to, again, like I through connections, through friends who were in marketing, through the New Jersey Camp Loema thing, I got kind of like an interview with a studio in Manhattan called Bigfoot Studio. And I'd kind of basically spammed all of these places in the US because I wanted to do an internship in a music studio, but I wanted to do New York because it was like super cool and I knew the place and I had friends and all that kind of stuff there. So I ended up staying with friends, got this gig with Bigfoot Music, and I just interned there for it's like 6 months. At different times. It wasn't all in one go. So I would go out there like the start of 1 year, and then go out there a couple of months later, and then and so on and so forth. So I built up this like really cool relationship with the people working there. Learned so many cool stuff. It was amazing experience, and the studio was beautiful. It was like at the top of this building in Union Square that just looked out onto Manhattan. It was. I don't know how anyone couldn't be inspired working in that building, and everyone was super talented. There were loads of producers. I did a lot of like, cable, plugging in and all that kind of stuff, setting up for sessions and doing recording sessions, and just met some amazing people doing it. So I was into music production in a big way. And doing that got me this job in Norwich as a teacher, a music teacher at a place called Access to Music. So we're talking like after Toys R Us now, I get this job at Access to Music. I actually went there as a student first. So I went there as like a 26 years old, like kind of a mature student. Did a 1 year course and got what I needed, qualification wise out of it. And then because I was such a, kiss butt, because I was a bit of a teacher's pet, they remembered me. And one of my teachers, Rob, he would come into Toys R Us every now and again and see me, because I'd got that job basically to, pay for doing the course in a way. And he would come in and speak to me quite often with his kid, and he'd say, we'd love to have you over. You should come try and get a job at Access. We're always after kind of, guest speakers, or just, people that want to do like, music production courses and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll think about it. Didn't think about it at that point. Anyway, I was probably at Toys R Us about a year, and I started getting anxious, like that kind of like, I need to be doing something else with my life. I need to be elsewhere. I need to be doing something else. I'm like 26, 27 at this point. I'm like, I need to get out. So like, I ended up, I would have been a bit older than that. I would have been about 28 at that point. So I ended up basically saying, right, I need to do something with my life. And at the same moment of saying that, I get a Facebook message from Chris, who worked in the office at Access to Music, saying, a job's just come up. Would you be interested in interviewing for it? Because you remember, we remember you from, and I got friendly with Chris as well. So that was great. And I'm like, cool, yeah, I'll come in and have an interview. It was crazy because if you imagine a bunch of creatives trying to run a business, that's what it was like. It was, I love them to death, but at the time it was all over the place. And Ian Johnson, shout out to Ian Johnson, he was my boss at the time. Amazing guy. He was Ed Sheeran's manager at one point.
Oh, really? Wow.
He actually got Ed in touch with his manager, who is now his manager now. But like he again met Ed a few times. Really nice guy, really cool. He would come and do like guest speaker spots at our college.
Wow,
we've got video on YouTube of him doing like little freestyle like things where he's playing on the guitar and some of the students are rapping along with him and everything. It's really cute. Like, it's amazing. But we had like, that it was really cool environment, very like a lot of talented people I was surrounded by. And there's me doing like, like recording and composition and music, digital music stuff, basically. And I ended up getting like the course manager role quite early on. So I was in charge of like an entire year, couple of year groups on the DM course. And then by the end of it, I suppose you'd call it like a vice principal. So I was like second in command at the college. And we'd gone like over 6 years, we'd done a lot. We'd got into this beautiful facility where the previous place was a bit rotting to the ground, and we moved out of that into this like, it's like an old TV studio in Norwich, and it is absolutely friggin' massive. It's called Epic, and it's got this huge like glass front, and it was where they filmed all like the TV shows and all of the stuff that they did, locally there, and it was great. It was amazing. So I ended up getting that job there. So I was in and around all this like talent and everything. It was amazing, and I'm making music constantly. Word Burglar then releases Welcome to Cobra Island. Now, for about a year before that happened, I am working on this GI Joe album. Like it was because I'm. This is another thing that might confuse and shock a few people. I'm also a rapper, so yeah. So I did a couple of releases back in the day where I released music, and we're talking like, we're not talking guns and drugs. We're talking nerdy stuff. And like, I'm a middle class white kid. Of course, I'm going to rap about dumb stuff. I'm not going to be rapping about stuff that isn't relevant to me.
Yeah.
So so that was what I was doing. And then so I put this whole like album together, very similar in the similar kind of way that Word Burglar did, but mine was Action Force based. So it was going to be like Action Force and like, very niche. And also was going to release it on tape. I had like this idea of putting everything on like this on like tape cassette, and then having like a digital download obviously as well. But kind of tapes were kind of like coming back in like a retro kind of way.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be really nice to have like the insert with all the lyrics on it and everything. Anyway, and I released a bunch of different music at that point. I was working constantly. I was making music with other artists. I was on a label called Gordon Bennett Records, which was amazing. There's an album on iTunes, probably still, I imagine, called Raptillion, where I do also. It's still one of my favorite things I've ever done, with a guy called Max Alexander. Shout out to Max. He was the producer on most. He was my kind of co-producer on that album. He actually made most of the beats on that, I think. Anyway, so I was doing a lot of that stuff, and anyway, Word Burglar releases Welcome to Cobra Island. I'm like, right, great, scrap that then, because I'm not gonna do anything any better than what he's just put out, because it was amazing. It was a brilliant album.
Yeah.
Shout out to Word Burglar, absolutely genius guy. Lo and behold, I never thought in a million years I'd be working with him, and here we are. I'll explain that a little bit later on, but shortly we better call it soon. So anyway, I had all this music, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all this, like, like cool beats I've made with GI Joe music samples and stuff like that? And then I started talking to Dave about doing a podcast, and I said to Dave, like, have you ever thought of like doing like a little, Action Force GI Joe podcast? And he's like, funny you should say that. Another friend of mine, Eddie, has been wanting to do a podcast as well, like a comedy-ish one, something a bit funny, a bit, a bit like, like fun and loose. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And then, because What Sanjay Mind was really big at the time, and I remember David invited Gary and James Kavanagh Jr., Gary Godso and James Kavanagh Jr. to roll out Roll Call. So we met those guys there, had kind of made that relationship, that connection. And then, again, when we started our podcast, they were like, well, just piggyback on our feed. We can be a spin-off and we'll do it that way. And we did. And
Awesome.
The rest is history, basically. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing I was mentioning about Word Burglar is that I ended up making 3 tracks for Spaceverse, which came out last year. And we're working, we then, for he did a vinyl release of Welcome to Cobra Island. And as a special bonus, we put another track out called The Letter from Snake Eyes Part 4, which is, again, my track and him rapping on it. So to be able to work with him at this point is unreal. And we're working on new stuff as well as we speak. He's done some amazing stuff on a couple of other tracks I produced. and we're going to be working on quite a bit in the future. So there's more to come. Yeah.
Awesome. If you guys watching this have not checked out Word Burglar stuff, I highly recommend it. Where could people go to find that? Is there?
Yeah, it's propsdepartment.bandcamp. Yeah, but props department. If you just go to Bandcamp, actually go to bandcamp.com and type in Word Burglar, you'll get his entire back catalogue on there. Alternatively, you can find him on Facebook and Twitter as well, and the links are all through there, through all those pages as well. So yeah, he's pretty much everywhere. He's on Instagram as well, I believe, and all those other places.
And so I think we're going to try to wrap it up here. I think this is a good place to.
Are you sure? We've probably still got another few hours to.
I think I'd like to maybe have you back again at another
Hell
time
yeah.
to continue.
Love to.
I always want to leave people wanting more. So I want to go ahead and do a quick plug for next week before we sign off. Hold on one second. So I'm doing this show every Sunday at 9 p.m. And next week, if I can find it here, I've got, I think this is it. Yeah, here we go. Next week, special guest is Mr. Michael Mercy.
Love Michael Mercy.
From YouTube. He'll be here chatting with me. So mark your calendars next Sunday, May 2nd at 9 p.m. So that should be a lot of fun.
I cannot recommend that enough. He is an absolute awesome lad. Love him.
Beautiful man. I want to, so Chris, I want just plug all of your stuff again.
Okay.
We did it at the beginning, but for those that might have missed it, where can people find you?
You can find me at Diagnostic80 there with a K, and that's the German spelling. So don't worry, I'm not trying to be straight or anything. And that's where Diagnostic80 comes from, is from the music side of what I do. And yeah, that is on Instagram and obviously Twitter. But then also at the Full Force on pretty much everything: Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, Twitter, then also YouTube. So all of those, and also Patreon as well. If you want to, jump on the Patreon, we have a really cool little fan club that we send out for certain, for the kind of higher tiers. We do some amazing intel as well. So any information that we, necessarily can't put out publicly on a massive scale, some interesting tidbits of information do get out on the Patreon, which is, again, you can get us on the Full Force there.
Awesome. And I want to apologize to you guys in the chat. We just don't have time to get to your questions. A lot of great questions.
I'll apologize to everyone for rambling on constantly for 2 hours.
No, this has been great. I love hearing people's stories. So if you guys, I will definitely ask Chris to come back, and maybe we can do a little more Q&A next time.
That's cool. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks again to Chris. Great having you here, and be sure to check out his podcast or here on YouTube for his stuff. It's awesome. And should we end with a Yo Joe or a Full Force?
I think we should do both simultaneously.
I think that's a good idea.
You do Full Force, I'll do Yo Joe. How does that sound?
Awesome. All right. So on the count of three, we'll go 1, 2, 3.
Yo Joe!